Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, my guest is Charley Wilkison. He's the executive director of CLEAT. That's the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas. Mr. Wilkison, how are you?
Good morning. Doing well.
Good. I'm excited to have you. It's a pleasure to speak with you. You and I have never met, so it's good to meet you as well. So just real briefly, what is CLEAT? I know I said it's the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas, but that doesn't necessarily answer. That's not the whole picture. What is CLEAT?
Well, in the 1970s, young officers returning from Vietnam, particularly police officers and deputy sheriffs, formed their own association in Texas because they couldn't get a lawyer, and they couldn't use the statutes that were in effect to keep them from being fired, demoted, or disciplined unfairly across the state. So they came together. It took some time, and a bunch of 25, 26-year-olds gathered together at the El Tropicana Hotel in San Antonio and formed themselves into a new union. And they didn't affiliate with the Texas AFL-CIO, and they disassociated with the Texas Municipal Police Association. And so it was a whole new deal. And so 47 years later, we have $11 million budget. We have 27,000 plus members, roughly 117 local affiliate unions across the state. And we represent officers in over 800 agencies across the state, individual officers. So our primary goal on every single day is to make sure that when an officer calls us and they have an issue, it either is a critical incident, which we respond in the field in real time to every shooting, every in custody death. We're there within 2 hours. With a staff attorney that's a real lawyer on the ground that works only for CLEAT. And so we're there to protect their interest and make sure that they're answering questions that will protect their job. And so that's number one goal. We do so much more. We're in some municipal and county groups, we're the dental provider for their insurance, and other places we do the collective bargaining contract. Other places we grieve civil service grievances that are lower level complaints about discipline. And in other places, we're just the protector, the card in the wallet, the phone number in the phone that they know that they can count on in a very increasingly violent state, in a place that has been anti-police in certain areas, and a place where their job and their life is on the line. So we're focused on making sure that when they're falling in the line of duty, that their family receives the $500,000 that we passed through the legislature for each family. It was $50,000 when I came to work in 1994. The family of a fallen officer, the children receive a free college tuition.
Yep.
That was one of our bills. I went back and we extended it to give them 2 extra years, because many of these kids are, they're just little kids and they're in counseling. It just takes a little longer for them to get their feet on the ground in education, higher education. In every aspect of an officer's life, once they raise their hand, take that oath, we're involved in some way if they want us to be. It's an at-will, right-to-work state.
Yeah.
So nobody's compelled to join anything. They can join or not. They have a choice. And so we're not a part of the FOP, which is more of a northern group, and the AFL-CIO is more of a traditional labor group. We're not a part of any of those things.
Yeah.
CLEAT's an independent union for officers. And when I say union, I say that in the respects of we almost embrace the concept that people were calling us unions. but we're an association in the sense that we do not have the right to strike. We've never sought that. We've never sought slowdowns in work, any kind of labor practice.
Yeah.
We simply negotiate on behalf of the officers and advocate on behalf of the officers. So they do have meet and confer, which that was my bill that I worked so hard on to pass in 2005. We passed one in 1995, one in 1997, one in 99, and one in 2001. And then the big bill in 2005 was killed in 2003 when in a fight with the Democrats, Republicans were in a fight. And so everybody went to Oklahoma, and our bill was one of the casualties of that. So we're really proud of the fact that it's interest-based bargaining.
Yeah.
That it's, the leverage is simply, it's almost like being married. Officers want to be cops. They go to a great deal of trouble for that calling, to help people, to serve and protect. So they're going to do that if they can. And then the public, the government, the political subdivisions have to field a team. So they're going to have officers of some kind. So we're almost stuck with one another. So there's no reason for adversarial, fights and strikes and things like that. Instead, we look at it as we're going to find common ground. You're going to have to pay your cops. We're for you paying them more. You're for trying to balance your budget. So we have a common interest.
Yeah.
And so we work across the state too, in all the areas that have collective bargaining or meet and confer.
Yeah. So you've been at this for a long time. And you obviously have a lot of experience. It sounds like you've had a lot of success as well. But you mentioned something there. I think you said that it's an increasingly violent state. And I assume you're talking about Texas, right? I mean, it's
yes,
part of Texas. What do you mean by that? Is Texas increasingly more violent, and in what way?
Well, I would give you two areas of demonstration for that illustration. I would say number one is more violent simply because you've had a population explosion, and so the more people you get in a room, in a street, in a city, the more chance for crime or violence against one another, against police. That's just a given. So that's what you've had. Secondly, this has always been a violent state. The officers are honored on the wall there on the east side of the Capitol. That behind the state of Texas, we're the second largest contributor to that building, that wall. On that wall, 51% are killed by gunfire. And so I would just give that as another illustration of a violent state. Texas is generally near the top every year in deaths of officers, and near the top of the 50 states. So you think of us as we're more of a middle-aged state, correct? I mean, New York had years and years of head start.
Yeah.
We're being in the 13 colonies. And so Texas has consistently had the sad distinction of being at the top or near the top of every year of officers killed in the line of duty. And of those officers killed in the line of duty, 51% are killed by gunfire. So this is a violent state. There are criminals, real criminals, in Texas, and in spite of whether we label them as something else and decide not to prosecute them, we can become, shade tree psychologists and sociologists and members of the clergy. We can describe past events to a criminal. We can forgive them, but they still committed the act.
Yeah.
And so if the act is aggravated, if it's premeditated, if it's intentional, then it still harmed someone. There's still someone who was harmed by that criminal act. So that makes you a criminal. And so in that case, I would say that Texas still has a violent underbelly. Some of it if you look at Uvalde, would be something that you'd say, well, that wasn't something, it wasn't a property crime. It wasn't particularly a hate crime aimed at a specific type of individual, but it's still a deadly crime. And so Texas is a violent state, and I would just use that as my summation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you referenced you're referencing some maybe the new wave of DAs that we have not only in Texas but across the nation, and I do want to talk about that. But just before we get there, can we talk a little bit about the state of public safety in Texas? Sort of, you say that Texas has always been sort of a violent state, and you gave some good examples there. But in general, during the pandemic, especially, so I live in Austin. I think we broke our record homicide number during that time. It's kind of gone down a little bit, but it's still pretty high. And people point to, well, what's the per capita, crime rate, all this other stuff. So I don't know. I hear crime is up and I hear crime is down. I hear it's flat. I don't really know what to think. I know it kind of feels like something has changed. I have that feeling, and I think people are acting like crime is up.
I think there are two aspects to that. One is, I remember years ago that I was testifying in a committee in the Capitol, and there was a headline that said that auto theft had been reduced by 50%.
Yeah.
In 1 year. So I held it up for the committee. Senator Frank Madla was the chairman, and I said, if it drops another 50% next year, we won't have any auto theft. I said, this is just a lie. It's a statistic. And the fact is that they report your vehicle missing the first day, because that helps in statistics, because a stolen vehicle, they said, well, we haven't absolutely proven that it's been stolen.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that it was in your driveway or it was where you parked it and now it's gone, it's missing. And so you're missing the first day. And in the second day, you verify that it's still missing. Third day, I'm paraphrasing,
Sure.
But the third day, then all of a sudden it is a stolen vehicle. Well, those first 2 days, it dropped outside the FBI statistics. And so what you've done is played a little number game with the managers in the police department. And so sure enough, you don't have as many stolen vehicles. Well, it was stolen the first day. And I understand the difference between missing a joyride, someone took the car you didn't know, or whatever happened. But so I understand the circumstances could be that way. But in the end, we play all these little number games. So crime is either A, the fact, or it's B, how you feel. Oh, I once had a poll and I asked the public in this more than really kind of safe community, do you believe that you will be a victim of a crime in the next 12 months? And 75% of the people there had a fear of crime. Well, officers work on two basis. You need them there for the real crime, but you also need them there to make you feel safe. That is what they do. That's what a police department, a sheriff department completes for a civilized society, is that we have them there for the safety of the community. So I think that Texans feel unsafe, and so therefore they are unsafe. And so the crime could drop a few points in one direction or the other, but before you have a celebration, remember that your population increased while your party was going on, while you were having your celebration, while you were talking to the media, or you're taking your victory lap. There are people coming here from every direction, and in that is going to be new opportunity to take things from them, to hurt them, and all manner of folks that are here. So it's just an incremental population ratio.
Yeah.
And crime is going to increase, and it will continue to be high.
Yeah. So let's talk about the DAs in Texas. As I said, I mentioned, I live in Austin, so I am inundated in the news with.
I live in Austin.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I see the news. I'm on social media. I know what's going on. And it does seem like there's this, this new wave of DAs that, treat crime and prosecution differently than, I don't know, than it was in the past or what people expect or something like that. However you want to phrase it. And I think that there's maybe some real consequences to that. They may disagree with that, but I wanted to hear, you as the executive director of CLEAT, you're big in law enforcement. Um, how do you look at this new wave of DAs?
Well, it's unfortunate. I think that America somehow we're constantly going from one direction to another, and and this will be very unpopular, but we rarely find the center, which is where good government comes from. I'm not talking about political thought. I'm not talking about right to express or any of those things, but policy and how things work, whether the trains run on time, whether you have enough police officers in the street to do the job. Those kind of things are decided by public policy. And for all of my 65 years, the district attorney in Texas was by and large a non-political person. They wound up being in the party that was in power at the time.
Yeah.
But their job was this benign, almost scientific position of prosecuting criminals and deciding when something with, working with law enforcement, deciding the intent of an act. So of course you had situations where people were let go, not prosecuted. All those things would be true.
Yeah.
If you went back and that's okay. So because they've always had the ability in that particular office to make decisions on the ground. And so that discretion then extended and still has extended to the law enforcement officer, the ability to decide, whether a kid had answered all the questions, could be given a ride home, versus someone who's committed a criminal act and needs to be taken to jail. And so all these things fall in together. What's happened now is you have a political train of thought, a bend of the progressive side of the Democratic Party that has decided the problem here is the laws are wrong. And our solution is not going to be gain the upper hand in the legislative bodies and change the world and ask the voters, hey, don't you agree the laws are wrong? And let's go change them. No, we'll just not prosecute them.
Yeah.
So the laws will remain the same. The citizens' voices will remain the same. That murder's murder. That that 1,000 guns in the back of your trunk of your car is not possessing a few firearms for yourself.
Sure.
That you're a gun runner. That multi-kilos of heroin doesn't mean that you're unfortunately using and so that what we've decided then in these big cities, and it's not just Travis County, the issue is less strong and maybe particularly in Harris and Bayer and Dallas, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So entire categories of crime are just being forgiven. They're just literally just going in front of the process and saying, we're not going to prosecute that. So let them go. And so criminals, prior convicted criminals, are being returned to the street. It's happening in all across the state. So the legislature had a chance to really do something strong. And of course, the legislature chose kind of a middle ground. And so they fixed it so that a DA could possibly be removed.
Yeah.
For something besides public drunkenness, I believe. But anyway, the fact is that it didn't go far enough. And so this is going to kind of continue in here in Travis County. we've made it so hot on the district attorney that we believe he's reeled it back just a notch or two.
Okay.
We've seen him kind of make a flight correction. It's not enough. And it's because it's an election year, and he believes his Democratic opponent is going to run against him.
Yeah.
On that very issue. How it all turns out, who knows? But in the end, that's not the way to run the district attorney's office. It's about politicizing it. It's wrong. It's incorrect. Politicizing policing, wrong. Politicizing prosecution is wrong. Prosecuting 21 police officers for protecting the city while letting gun runners and convicted murderers, people guilty of family violence.
Yeah.
Letting those people go over and over again is the incorrect way to run any kind of public safety. It all revolves around whether criminals learn a lesson, and if you're not even prosecuted, and the grand jury never had the opportunity to even see the facts or learn them, then the prosecutor has become something else.
Yeah. Sure. So, the situation with the police in Austin, severely understaffed. I don't know if that's the case. And I think DPS, when they were in Austin, there was news stories about DPS also being understaffed. I don't know if the Houston or San Antonio or Dallas, El Paso, whatever, name another.
Everyone's understaffed because after George Floyd and the particular way the media reacted and responded to that, and the way we all reacted and responded to that, these really good jobs that never paid very much, but were steady, and people with a certain, kind of a acclimate toward protecting the community, they're drawn into the private sector now, where A, it's safer,
yeah,
B, pay is higher, and you're not hated on site for putting on the blue skin that you do to go and do your job. And so they're understaffed. It's turning a corner, and I'm encouraged to see that it is. But Austin's down 500 officers.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah. So is there, how the DA, prosecutes or not prosecutes maybe criminals? I mean, how does that affect police officers, right? I hear, and I don't know this, I'm not a police officer, but I hear that, a lot of times they just say, well, what's the point, right? Or they might say that, what's the point? That's not going to get prosecuted. Why waste time and resources on that? Responding to that.
It impacts them in the first sense, because they have a sworn duty to protect. And so, and the law goes further in Texas. It says, do you have a reasonable expectation to act?
Yeah.
So an officer is on the hook. And so there's a real crime victim that's been forgotten here, that's on the other side of all this. So the crime victim, there was a real crime. There was a 911 call. There was an arrest made. And then the person's turned loose. So we're not just talking about the tender feelings of police officers and whether they feel valued or not. It's that they see their job for nothing. And so then 21 of them get prosecuted on a day when they're getting stoned, throwing frozen water bottles, all kinds of objects, people writing F the police and spray paint all over the main station here in Austin, Texas. And so they stand strong and clear the interstate, and they're prosecuted. And so it gets to be a place where officers will ask themselves, if I'm going to stay in policing and I'm under the age of 50, then I probably better go to a suburban place where the police are still loved and respected, even if it's a cut in pay. The flip side of that is that if I can go do something else and fill out the next 15 years before retirement in a higher paying job that is safe, and why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And so that's what it stops recruiting. It's been detrimental. So DAs do play a role in the greater arguments about public safety policy. And when it's broken, anywhere along that chain, then it creates an inequity everywhere. It would be the flip side of all this is if you lived in a police state, it would be horrible. And so we don't want that. You don't want a prosecutor that prosecutes innocent people and railroads them and sends them to prison. So that's the flip side. The other side is you just don't have a prosecutor and just picks and chooses the crimes you're going to commit. I mean, you're going to prosecute. And so there's an inequity, an imbalance.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened to the police department here. And of course, they didn't fill their academy classes. The Austin City Council outlawed license plate readers. So you can't tell a stolen vehicle because you might be invading some criminal's privacy. Sure. To drive around in somebody else's vehicle. So in the end, you know, the world gets out of balance. The reason why all these things are in place, the reason officers are tested so they have to take so many tests, the reason they're held to a higher standard and can be terminated for any reason, they have to tell the truth anytime they're asked. All these things have come through 150, 200 years of experience.
Yeah.
And so the imbalance here from the, in this case, the left side of the political spectrum has created a mayhem. So criminals know this is the garden. This is a place where you can have free rainbow stew.
Yeah, you can learn and thrive, right? So what is the legislature's role in all of this, if any? You mentioned this past session that they passed some laws that perhaps that maybe you could remove a DA given certain circumstances. You say that wasn't quite strong enough.
Well, for us, yes.
Sure. So, I'm wondering, we got primaries are kind of happening right now, some new elections, and then we'll have a totally new legislature. I think it's the 89th legislature in 2025. And I'm wondering what will be your legislative priorities? Is there a place, for instance, for the legislature to act when it comes to, understaffed police departments, or do they need to go further on the DA issue? Is there, what will CLEAT be focusing on?
Well, we need to make sure that we continue down this path, a good path, that the legislature put us on defunding the police. That needs to stop. And so they put that in statute, and so that a major urban area could not defund its police department. And so that's in place. I put in a little amendment on there, is almost like the Army haircut for political subdivisions. It passed, and it was by a Democrat, Abel Herrera from the Corpus area, and he stuck a friendly amendment on there as you couldn't defund their retirement system.
Oh, that's good.
And so because I just smelled it coming. I mean,
Sure.
You've been at your job long enough where I just thought, well, they can't, they're forced now by statute, they can't defund the police department. So they'll just defund the pension, and then you can't have any police officers because they also don't, in Austin, they don't get Social Security.
Yeah.
And so we stopped that. So I think that's the path you have to go down. I also think you have to look at district attorneys, and I think you have to solve those kind of issues. For us, of course, we believe you need to look at the officer's right to a hearing when they're accused. And that now is decided locally by Chapter 143 elections. And so we'd like to see the officer have certain inalienable rights of a hearing when they're accused by drug dealers, and their criminal defense attorneys, politicians, whoever winds up being on angry at the officer. We'd like to see the officer at least get a hearing and have due process rights. Yeah. Under the law, the same way any American would have. So those are things where we don't have it in 2024 today. We have large sectors of police officers, deputy sheriffs out working today that don't have even the floor of due process rights. If they're accused, they can just be railroaded right out of their job. And it's a very political situation. It's always been that way in Texas, and because of our right to work and at-will employment. So we'd like to look at common sense measures in there. The officers do something wrong, they need to be fired. They do something wrong, they need to be disciplined. It's a paramilitary organization, they have to follow the rules. In spite of all that, though, you would want them to be accused properly, that they actually had created the infraction before. And so to take the political brother-in-law, good old boy system out, and in process allow an officer to defend himself and say, wait, that's not how it happened. And it seems if we could get that done in 2025, it'd be a great thing for officers.
Yeah. And do you think if those things get resolved, and, I'll be rooting for you, but if those things get resolved, do you think that would perhaps as a second order consequence improve the staffing crisis across Texas if police officers?
It should.
Yeah.
It should. And I think we need to improve the staffing crisis across the state, but we also need the right kind of officers. And I've always said that training is important. It's the most important thing an officer can do. And so we need the highest caliber. When someone comes to your home, when someone pulls your car over, when someone interacts with you, you need to know that they're the very finest caliber of officer that could be attained by that political subdivision. So to do that, I think, you always have to look at the pay and benefit side, but the main thing that will drive people out of here is if the job's unfair. If you can just be politically accused of something, cannot defend yourself, and wind up either being demoted, defamed, causes a great discouragement. So I think fairness in every aspect of American life is always the greatest thing. And whether if you're, a criminal accused by the system, then all of us want you, that criminal, to have your say. It's the American way.
Yeah,
is we want you to be able to say, I didn't do it, wasn't there, I can prove it. Look, and we all root for the person that's innocent. And so same way in every aspect of life, and especially people that risk their lives to protect the rest of us. And we could do, that's the smallest thing we should do in Texas, is to make sure that when they're accused in this paramilitary setting that they're in, that they have due process and the ability to say that they didn't do it. And officers every day, I promise you, officers every day across the state of minor infractions and things are saying, yes, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I forgot to do that, or I didn't log off, or I jumped out of the car, or I did this, or I turned the corner too fast, or perhaps I was a little short with that person, or whatever it is that happens. Officers are taking their licks because they understand, they know. So we're not trying to create a system in which they're striking or there's work stoppage.
Yeah.
Or the officer has more rights than the citizens that they protect. No, just the same rights.
Yeah.
The same rights.
All right. Well, Charley Wilkison, Executive Director at the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Is there social media? I know your website, CLEAT.org, but social media, anything else that you want people to be able to find?
People follow us on Twitter, X, and they follow us on Facebook and all the social medias. I'm on there as well, and I generally confine most of my posts to officer-involved shootings.
Right.
I've kind of committed to the fact that the public needs to know, the media needs to know, the politicians need to know what a dangerous, scary world we live in, and how hard these brave men and women are working, and then what CLEAT is doing in the process. So I got 140 characters to describe all that, but check it out.
Sure. Well, Mr. Wilkison, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time. I'll put the links for all of that down in the description below, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, sir.